Hello and welcome to our first podcast. My name is T the Beast, and I'm here with.
And my name is Minizuf, and let's get straight into this new podcast.
North Korea. So, North Korea is quite the isolated country, as everyone knows. So they happen to have a magazine. It's called the Foreign Trade Magazine of the DPRK, I think. Foreign Trade of the DPRK. In this magazine, they recently published some news about their newest tablet, which is actually being created by the Younghung IT company. And guess what it's called? It's called the iPad.
So there are some specs on this that were released in this foreign trade of the DPRK magazine. And so the company that created is Young IT company, as stated earlier, and the tablet's name is the Radeon iPad. And it has a shocking 1 gigahertz of CPU, 512 megabytes of RAM, and 8 gigabyte of internal memory, along with 16 gigabyte of external memory. And it weighs 250 grams, which is like half a pound. So it's kind of heavy. And you know what's shocking? It has the same specs as the iPhone 4, which was released roughly 7 years ago, I think. So it kind of shows how outdated North Korea is at this point.
Yeah. Well, actually, I also read that in 2013, North Korea also had another tablet. It was an Android tablet, and it was called the Samjeong tablet. And this tablet actually had the exact same specs. And I mean, like, exactly the same. Exactly the same CPU, the exact same amount of RAM, just the exact same, storage space. And it just has slightly different apps and a different name, which is ridiculous. They have no new ideas, they have no new technology, and they're just re-releasing old things. It's ridiculous.
But with North Korean companies doing this, I would expect, since this is a magazine which is published to foreign countries,
mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you expect lawsuits to be created for these little North Korean companies? Because it's like, how can a North Korean company get away with this? And honestly, what I think is that everything in North Korea is kind of rooted to the government. And it's like, if you were to start a lawsuit against a little company in North Korea, I think that the chances that you get involved with the government is really big. And I don't think as a company you really want to get involved with any government, as we have seen earlier this year with Apple and the U.S. government, after the NSA wanted to get the passwords for phones to investigate into the Orlando bar shooting.
Yeah, but I mean, North Korea, I think it's a slightly different situation, since they the government controls everything anyway. And in this case, the government wouldn't have a problem with this new technology. But I think since the iPad is actually a name trademarked by Apple, as it says, like, if you go to the bottom of the website, it'll say that, like, the iPad, the Mac, and stuff like that is a trademarked name. And they don't seem to be suing this company, but I think that's mainly because of the fact that, North Korea is a pretty, volatile government, which means that if you sue a company of theirs, they'll get really angry and, nuke the world off. That's unlikely, but, they don't want to risk it, maybe.
But at the same time, I would see that North Korea has money issue, and it's suspected that in this place called Building 14, which is in the capital of Pyongyang, that they are printing fake US dollar bills. I would see, if I was in the North Korean government, I would see these type of situations where you are legible to be sued as a good opportunity, as if you can actually win it, money, like US dollars, are valued so much, as ironic as it is, in North Korea, since the currency is worth a lot more than their own. And this leads to a situation where North Korea is desperately trying to get money, and we can see that somehow they're still exporting their fake bills to countries such as China, which distributes them throughout Southeast Asia and the Northern Asian regions. And this is like really fraudulent in a sense that they're getting away with it.
Yeah, that is true. However, since I don't think that they would win that lawsuit in the first place, because this is like Apple's been around for how long now? A long time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but like at least like 10 years, I think. So this new iPad, it came out this year basically, or because this magazine is quite delayed. I think maybe at the end of last year or something like that. But they would not win that kind of thing, even with like the backing of a government, with the North Korean government. But you never know. I don't think that's how it works.
If you're wondering, Apple is roughly 30 years old.
Oh damn!
But here's the thing.
Misjudged.
Here's the thing. We have seen that governments will go into lawsuits, and they'll take it to like the country's court or international court.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you have a government, right, they can call in as many lawyers as they want because their budget is so much larger than normally what a company would spend. But then at the same time, we have to look into the fact that Apple has one of the highest,
incomes.
How do you say it?
Earnings.
Yeah, has some of the highest earnings, which means that they can put just as much as a government like North Korea could into a lawsuit that's this big.
I don't think North Korea has any interest in suing anyone, since that's like completely against their own like agenda kind of thing. You know how they're like cut off from the world? If they just start randomly suing companies because they're using the same product name, that's just going to end up in a bad situation for them, So I don't think that's going to be a thing.
Well, it wouldn't really help anyone in that case, since North Korea has this little, they don't really like paying up. Any sanction that the UN has set has also just been declined. They don't listen to it. Like the nuclear provocations, they're like, fuck that, I don't want to listen. So that's pretty much North Korea in a nutshell. Sanctions, who the hell cares? And then we can see that the people in North Korea are, kind of brainwashed, since you'd expect that at the borders of South Korea and North Korea, the demilitarized zone, they both shoot they don't shoot at each other, but they send messages of propaganda over each other's border.
That's true.
And the North Korean soldiers don't seem to pay any attention to the propaganda that's being sent to them. So, to some sense, anything you do to North Korea wouldn't work. And that's the same what we kind of see at this point. In South Korea, there's these projects which try to drop off flyers everywhere throughout North Korea to try and inform the people.
Yeah,
but the punishments are so harsh that people don't want to even open up a booklet, and they're brainwashed to love their regime and their country. That's also why I say that the Trump committee and nearly every other country isn't really interested in going in a fight with North Korea, as it would be filled with guerrilla warfare. But now we're kind of drifting off topic.
Yeah, we are.
Let's look into the E3 conferences which happened this week.
Oh, they happen. They haven't happened yet, but yeah, they're happening on.
Well, we have rumors.
They're happening on June 13th.
Circulated this week.
It's happening on the June 13th, and there are now, obviously a lot of rumors as before every big conference, and so we have some rumors about some games as well as about some hardware. But starting off with the games, because that, in my opinion, is pretty interesting. So let me just quickly go through the list of the different games, and then we can have a short discussion about it. Yeah. So there's Nintendo, and they're planning to release a new Smash Brothers for the Switch, as well as a new version of Pokemon Sun and Moon. And currently that's called Pokemon Stars, but that name may change. That's basically it for Nintendo. Sony, they may be releasing Bloodborne 2. However, that is like pretty much a wild guess by someone with like tiny shreds of evidence pulled together from thin air. So not sure about that. But Microsoft, some people have been expecting Halo 6, but we know for sure now that that's definitely not happening, which is pretty sad because I would love to see a new Halo. But now Bethesda, they're releasing a lot of stuff. Some people are saying that they will release a new IP, which they'll call Starfield. And some dude on 4chan is saying that it's going to be basically a science fiction version of Fallout. And Bethesda is also working on 3 longer-term projects, but not everyone is sure. No one is sure what games they actually are. So maybe we'll see something like that at E3. And there's also a new Wolfenstein game that might come out, which will be called Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, and maybe a second The Evil Within game, but that's also unsure. Then there's also Square Enix. They may be releasing a new Tomb Raider game called Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the one I'm personally most excited for, but that's my opinion, as well as the one that Ubisoft is going to be releasing, which is Assassin's Creed Origins. And yeah, that's basically the list of games for E3 this year that are rumored, that are big rumors. Yeah.
Well, what really caught my eye is that Bethesda is starting to think about releasing Fallout 4 in virtual reality. And since Doom Virtual Reality is out there, it's kind of a gateway into how Fallout 4 will probably develop. We already know that Skyrim is coming to Nintendo Switch, which is kind of weird since you would not expect Bethesda to be releasing a game like that, which is pretty old, onto such a new device. But the idea of Fallout 4 in virtual reality really caught my attention because, first of all, I'd hope that it would be a experience and not clunky like all these early release virtual reality games. Along with that, honestly, Fallout 4, just imagine walking around in a post-apocalyptic world and feeling like you're in it.
That sounds pretty nice, in my opinion, but like my own opinion, I think that the virtual reality is not developed enough yet to provide the best experience of Fallout, because Fallout is very science fiction, so maybe they'll have to, develop the hardware more before they should.
I'd agree.
To VR, yeah.
I agree with that, and as well as that, companies such as Oculus at this point, it's all fun and games at home, but I think that if you really want to have a good virtual reality experience, I think that they should make type of arcades just specified for virtual reality where it's all rooted into one very good computer, and you just give $10 for I don't know, shit ton of hours, and you can just explore the virtual reality world.
And it's quite it's quite interesting, but I think they have arcade games like that already, such as the ones with the paint, where they the one that NVIDIA released. It's basically a tech demo generally because they don't have great enough games, but it's basically just the spraying of paint around painting, and then there's also office work simulators and stuff like that, which are sort of arcadey, and they're not super realistic, meaning that VR can support them in general, I think. So we can see where that goes, but yeah, not sure about that yet.
Okay, so let's move on to Ubisoft.
Yes, Ubisoft. Very interesting. Assassin's Creed Origins. It's going to be their next Assassin's Creed, and people are really saying that it's going to be released this E3. And I'm really hoping.
And Far Cry 5.
Okay, yeah, but Assassin's Creed Origin, more important in my opinion. Way better game. but that's just my opinion. But Assassin's Creed Origins, I think it's going to be a good game because you know how they usually release it once a year, right? This year they haven't done that, and they skipped a year. So if they do, I think it will be a much better game than usually, which will result in great, better gameplay, than usual. So generally, it'll be a good game in my opinion. So that's something I'm gonna buy for sure.
Well, I want to mention Far Cry 5. So it's a new, genre for Far Cry. Since this is localized, or its focal point is in America, with some cultic rivalries. And it's an interesting concept, but I don't really think Far Cry 5 is going to be as successful as it can be. Even though it's going to be a great open world game, I just think that the story is going to be really fractured at this point. From the trailers that I have seen personally on Steam, which was released really recently, I didn't really feel so much of a connection to it compared to Far Cry Primal, which really was just, to me, was a really cool thing to see. But Far Cry 5, along with Far Cry 4, kind of started like the milking process of a series. They should have just kept it at Far Cry 3 and Far Cry Primal. And then over the years, let people like build up suspension and some hype for a new series that might be released.
I mean,
but Far Cry is being kind of milked at this point. So
I would agree with you on that, but I haven't actually watched the trailer, so I'm not sure exactly what happens in the game. And I'll watch the trailer after this because it sounds really interesting. But I think it could probably become a good game. It could be a good game because they have like a fan base, right? So they don't really have to find a new audience in theory, right? They already have like a set group of players that will play the game no matter what, which mean it's good for business.
But then at the same time, right? You may have a set audience, right?
Yeah.
But if they start to rely too much on modding, that the audience is always inevitably doing. If you have a fan base, you're gonna get people. Mods normally do enhance games, and I think that in Far Cry 5's case, the same is gonna happen. And honestly, there's not much to do about it. I'm just not going to be as successful as the other titles. It's going to be somewhat like Far Cry 4. It was mixed. Although the scenery was really nice, the stories are getting kind of broken.
I mean,
even though they're normally kind of in depth.
I mostly played Far Cry Primal.
It's really repetitive.
I mostly played Far Cry Primal and Far Cry 3, but so I didn't play that much Far Cry 4, but like from what my friends have said, that it's like a good game, but they could have done more. That's basically what's being said.
And I have to agree with that because I finished the Far Cry 4 campaign 2 times, both different ways, the easy way and the harder way. And what I felt is that they added the season pass, which is really stupid for a game that isn't really multiplayer. I'd say you should just release those DLCs instantly, since it was the Himalayas. And they already had a segment in the campaign where you're in the Himalayas, meaning that they had the capability to release it at the same time.
They literally just had to copy paste some stuff.
I'm scared that they're gonna do the same with Far Cry 5 and just start adding these little packets like, oh yeah, if you want this, you're gonna have to pay. It's like a sandwich without the stuff in between it, and you gotta pay extra for every piece of food you want in between that sandwich.
That's how it works in some places, but I would have to agree with you on that. But
and if any of you watch Linus Tech Tips, you've probably heard about the i9 CPU,
dude,
which is
that CPU
coming pretty soon.
Oh god.
Well, it's not a bad CPU.
In my opinion,
it's just
because I think from what I know, the i9 is actually it's like a what's it? Basically, the Core i9 is you know how AMD released their big like they have their Ryzen CPUs and stuff like that, right? So they released their Threadripper. So they released a new CPU, and that had like 18 cores. So what I think is that Core i9, like Intel, the Core i9 is basically they just dumped all the technologies that they had available into one thing, meaning that none of it really works super well. Like if you put it into your motherboard, some parts of the motherboard won't actually work just because of the fact that the CPU is designed slightly terribly. And I think that sort of makes it slightly worse because it's just a knee-jerk reaction to AMD's CPU. But
But to me, it looks like that the i9. First of all, to even run the i9, you're gonna need a new motherboard, the X299 slot motherboard, which is really pricey, and a better option at this point will have to be Ryzen. For the price, it's a lot better, and along with that, the benchmarks that we have recently seen, they're pretty good, and that's just there. It's a newer piece of software, not software. It's a newer CPU, and of course, it's going to do better than what it used to. Its predecessors.
That's true.
But at the same time, people are expecting the power requirements to be 160 watt, which is
ridiculous.
A lot for a CPU.
Yeah.
And at the same time, although it's good for the budget builders who are gonna see a price drop in the i5s and i7s, the i9 is just gonna be.
The thing is,
sitting there. It is an immediate response of AMD releasing a new CPU.
But I think the main thing to consider here is that the Core i9, like if you look at the charts, right, they have like how many versions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They have like 7 different versions of this i9, right? So the i7 has a base clock of 4.3 gigahertz, right? Whereas this new Core i9, all of the versions, the ones that have been announced, which is the 7800, 7820, 7900, for those, the base clock is actually lower than the one on the i7, with a 3.5, 3.6, 3.3 gigahertz respectively, which is not that great. And even with like the turbo clock, they with their new turbo clock 3.0, the new version, it only reaches like the turbo of an i7, which is ridiculous because they released a new piece of hardware that basically just has more cores than the old one, but it doesn't actually have a higher like clock speed count, right? So that's.
But then at the same time, while I'm looking at this right now, right?
Yeah.
It offers 10 cores, but that doesn't really make up for anything else. Those several extra cores it's not going to do as much as you think because you're RAM to help out the CPU with what it's doing, and it's just going to be really pricey. And honestly, that it needs a completely different motherboard is upsetting. The same goes for Ryzen, but Ryzen made it affordable with just in every single way. So it looks like AMD will most likely do better in this generation.
In my opinion,
but at the same time, i9 was just really rushed.
Yeah,
they should have just waited. Instead of rushing something right to catch up with your competitor. I think that you should just wait it out, see what the competitor does, and see what you can improve or do better than the competitor.
That's true.
Because right now, it just looks like AMD is just gonna blow.
Yeah, they're just gonna blow them out of the water.
Straight out of the water.
Yeah. No, but I think it's just basically they could have taken a lot of time. They could have given themselves like several more months, and they probably could have gone up quite a long time without releasing a new CPU and then when they release it, they could have like this bombastic, great, amazing CPU that is just better than everything else on the market, and that would instantly like increase their sales and everything. Whereas now it's sort of like their reputation sort of like it didn't go down the bucket, but like it's still there, but it's people think less of it, so maybe they'll go for an AMD next time they're in a store, instead of an Intel one. So that's,
and at the same time, although Intel is partners with thousands of companies, and they get all the support they can, it's not really going to work, I think. Along with that, the requirements that you need a different motherboard makes it terrible, since you can't really add any other CPUs to that motherboard. And what I have to say is that along with this, the main people, if you want to get more people into computers in general, I think that you're gonna have to look at more budget builds, or not budget builds, but more affordable equipment. And releasing i9s is good on in some
I can see
views,
what you mean here. Like,
but then at the same time, there's going to be new titles released which are meant for the i9's processing capabilities, which will just
that's true,
ruin the point of having a i5 or an i7. Since these 10 extra cores, if you have the extra RAM for it, will have a pretty big effect on gaming.
But as you said before, for budget people, I think this is actually a good thing for people who are on a budget, because as the Core i9 comes out, the older versions, the price goes down slowly, which is good, but it's also not good in the fact that newer games will have better graphics, not graphics, but better capabilities that will require more CPU power. But that's also a good thing because better games, right? But the one thing that's most the dumbest thing they basically do was the fact that you need a new socket for the motherboard, because that was basically what was before, it was keeping people from switching from Intel to AMD, because AMD has different sockets. Therefore, the motherboard has to be different, although some motherboards support both. But the sockets had to be different, so you had to switch your motherboard. Whereas now, if you want to upgrade, you might as well upgrade to an AMD, because their CPUs are cheaper, basically the same performance, and you're going to have to switch your motherboard anyway. So in that sense, it wasn't a good idea there. Yeah. And
this brings a lot of attention to AMD. Along with that, the sales for older AMD components are probably going to increase as people are going to be testing around with AMD. And with the announcement of Ryzen Threadripper, I was just looking up the new release from AMD. Ryzen Threadripper with 16 cores and 32 threads. That just blows i9 still out of the way. And honestly, the i9 is like a flop. To try and beat the Ryzen Threadripper, it just failed. More people are going to be looking at AMD at this point. And although AMD has this reputation of being chunky and cheap, I think that it's the better option at this point, even for gaming, just because of the speed at what they're developing. With the new Ryzen series just blowing everything out of range, with its price being quite affordable for a gaming build, I think it's good. And if what is it called? Intel really wants to continue doing good, I think that it should focus more on the Pentium series. That
would be a good idea.
Like the Pentium Skylakes, they're budget and they're really good. I was recently looking into a new Pentium because I want to build I'm going to be making a new build during the summer, and for my personal project. I'm looking at used computer parts and new parts for this personal project of mine, which I can then incorporate to show how you can make an affordable computer which runs pretty good. And I was looking through AMD and Intel for this, and to me, Intel Skylake Pentium, if you get a second-hand one for roughly 20 euros, or I think that's like $30.
Something like that.
That's affordable, and you get a really good CPU. If Intel started focusing a lot more on its Pentium series, I think that it would be more successful. Since budget builders, let's say you have one that buys an AMD Ryzen Threadripper, but for like $500, but you get like 10 budget builders buying your a brand new Pentium for $100. The Intel will still be making profit like that, but at this point it just looks like they're screwing up. And yeah, that's just kind of a shame, honestly, since I preferred Intel over AMD, but now I think I might start looking into AMD more.
I've had an AMD CPU for a while now, and I mean, in my opinion, better. I picked it because it was cheaper and just as effective. But yeah, but actually, now that since we're on the topic of gaming hardware anyway, there's actually the new release from AMD's new AMD graphics card, which is the Radeon Pro Vega graphics card, right? And this graphics card is pretty cool in my opinion, because it's basically an equivalent to NVIDIA's Titan X, as it has 11 teraflops of graphical power, and there's two types available. There's the 8 gigabyte and the 16 gigabyte versions, but in general they're quite like competitive with NVIDIA's graphics cards and stuff like that. So I think that's also nice, because AMD's basically they're doing pretty well now, because they're releasing not only a good CPU that's competing against Intel, but also a new graphics card that is competing against NVIDIA, both of which are like huge brands in their own markets, and they have the market share basically, right?
And I have to say, looking at the Radeon Pro Vega, it's powerful.
It is.
And I think it's going to be released for a reasonable price. But at the same time, I want to just mention, from what I'm seeing, people are going to be, I think that the public, especially in China, where most Bitcoin miners are, they're going to be looking at this, because this is a piece of equipment which they claim will not break as quickly. It's more durable for Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
It has a high performance, and I'm actually going to be rooting for AMD on this one.
Yeah. I mean, their price,
because it's just cool. Because if this ends up becoming affordable, it's not going to end up affordable, but let's just say this piece of software is going to make gaming so much smoother. It's going to allow so much more opportunities to game devs to make better graphics games, just because the fact that it is a lot more powerful than what you would expect.
The price tag on this thing is it's probably going to be more than $1,000, because it's trying to compete against NVIDIA's Titan cards, right? So, and those cost quite a bit of money, so it's going to be more than $1,000 basically for sure. However, they also have like their older the other versions of the AMD Vega ones, which are like the Vega Eclipse and the Vega Core, which are both tagged at $500 and $400. And there's,
so surprisingly, in my room right now, I have a gigabyte GPU.
You do?
Yeah, I found a computer, and it's actually really powerful. It's the Gigabyte GV R6870C.
GV R what?
And
R68?
R687OC.
OC,
Or 0C.
Okay.
And this is the one with, I'm not sure. It has 3 fans. I tried looking up this earlier, and I didn't get a lot of. All I know is that when I was doing benchmarks, they were really well. Even with a outdated CPU, it ran games really well. So some of the games I was testing on was CS 1080p. It managed to still hit above 80
Yeah, but
FPS,
that's I mean,
which is it's playable.
yeah,
Then I just did I played Civ on this highest settings.
that's all.
Really good, even though Civ is not a G,
Yeah,
it is CPU intensive. And then I also decided to test out Insurgency, and it played that pretty well. It was stuttery. It was not located in the GPU. The stutter, it was directly related to the CPU, but from what I saw, it was pretty cool. And yeah, for those of you who might be wondering, oh well, what software were you running on? Linux.
Oh wait, is this the build that you were doing where you had to install?
Yeah, this was the build. Yeah, this was
Oh,
the build where you were helping me install.
That was so ridiculous. So this this guy texts me, right, and he tells me that I built a new PC, right, from like cheaper parts, right, and then this dumbass didn't know how to install Steam on his Linux. It was really ridiculous.
I was using a free OS for the first time.
Yeah.
It was Ubuntu.
And that's normal, right? So
for me, it was actually not a bad experience because I managed to go to the graphic driver settings and I could just instantly select which graphic driver
that's true.
I was
It's pretty nice because I mean I like Linux.
The interface is also really nice in my opinion.
Basically
smooth.
Linux is like it's a lot like Mac, and because they're based on like the same. Oh crap! I can't remember the name. It doesn't matter, but they're based around each other, and so I really like the experience that Linux provides. With Windows is like more gaming focused, since more games are available on it in general. But with Linux, it's still like it's fun, especially if you're like programming.
The games that do run on Linux run well on Linux. So
yeah, that's
even though that like if we look at newer titles though, people always start joking about it's clunky, it's buggy, it's unplayable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's just normally people don't really know how to install properly. And that leads to
just like you
annoying stuff. But on Ubuntu, the drivers automatically get installed for you, so you don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah, I mean.
And here's some news: the AMD Threadripper will be half the price of the Core i9,
which is ridiculous since it's they're competing against each other.
AMD's Threadripper is going to be $850, while the Core i9 will be $1,000.
I mean,
which is just it's kind of sad, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to compete here, so it's
well, guys. Anyway, rounding up. This was our first podcast. If you enjoyed, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.